Welcome, everyone, to the War Room podcast brought to you by Warpath Ministries. I'm Jeff. I'm your host tonight. We have Bex Howell with us tonight. Hey, Bex. We have Joe Standley and Brandon Duckworth. We got a good show for you tonight. Got a couple of quick announcements here. You can follow us on all the socials at Warpath Ministries on Facebook, private Facebook group there. We have our weekly Zoom meetings that are Sunday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Friday night at 8:30 Eastern. We'll drop that link in the bio of this video. Like, share, subscribe on YouTube there for us. And another big announcement that we have, October 4th is going to be Awaken the Spirit, our revival, Cherokee Park in Morristown, Tennessee. Looking forward to that. A couple great speakers that are going to be there. We have Holy Beards, Josh, going to be there. We have Jordan Wilson who's going to be speaking. We have our own Joe Stan and Bex Howell speaking. We have some musical guests that are going to be there. We'll announce those as time goes on, and make sure that you're there. Accommodations will be lined up. We'll have food trucks there, baptisms going on, stuff for kids to do. It's going to be an incredible event. Great time to worship, and just going to be amazing.
So excited for that revival.
That was everyone.
Mark it down on your calendars, baby.
Mark it down. That was everyone.
Pretty
Fantastic.
Good. Excellent.
Doing good, man. I've had a good day. Grateful.
Good. Well, tonight we're going to spotlight Brandon Duckworth. He's a part of Warpath Ministries. Does a lot for the ministry. He's the hardest working man in show business. So we're going to spotlight him tonight. How you doing, Brandon?
Doing good. How you doing, bro?
Good, man. So let's jump right in. Brandon, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of background.
My name's Brandon Duckworth. I'm actually from Morristown, Tennessee. We'll be doing the revival there. Lived here all my life. Grew up here, been all over, but always end up back home. I love it in the mountains here. I work at a local cemetery and been there for a few years, and just grateful to be a productive member of the community today.
It ain't always been that way, has it, Brandon?
No, sir. It absolutely has not. Left a lot of trash on the litter on the community there in my past, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
So let me ask you, what was life like for you before addiction entered your life, before running the streets entered your life? What was it like growing up, Brandon?
Well, I come from a big family. My father never really was in the picture, but my mother always was. There was 4 of my brothers and sisters that lived at home with me, but I have 13 brothers and sisters spread all over the place. But in my immediate household, there was 4 of us. I was fortunate enough to have a stepfather for quite a few years that kind of led me on my way. It's where I got my work ethic, and he was a real good man, stepped in when he didn't have to. His name was Willie. Mom done a real good job, keeping us all 4 together. My mother come from a rough background herself. She was raised in an orphanage and stuff, so it was real important to her to keep all 4 of us together, and she done that for the majority of our lives.
So, Brandon, you talked about, your father wasn't in the picture. Did that have an impact on you growing up?
Absolutely. You hear people talk about going hunting and just doing all the things that a boy would do with his father, and that was never, even when Willie stepped in, it was it never fills that hole in your life. Now my father came into the picture later on in life when I was about 8 years old, and he would bounce in and out, and he struggled with a lot of demons in his life himself, and unfortunately he never got those under control before he left this earth. But he done the best he could, but it absolutely had a huge impact on my life. And it really was, I was an older man when I realized how big of an impact that it really did have on my life. His absence and just looking for, somebody to teach you to be a man. There was no one there. You just learn those things on your own as you grow up, and, without someone there to teach you, those lessons come hard.
Right. So with your father coming in and out of your life, like with every time that he would show up and then leave again, would that kind of establish the feelings of abandonment and not being wanted or accepted with you?
You always wonder, if you're not good enough, or if, the feelings of inadequacy, or, why can't he just, stay sober long enough to provide a home for us to go to on the weekends, or, have some sort of participation in our life. And he would put together some time every now and again, you know what I mean? Might go 6 months where we have good connection, but and he would always disappear again.
Interesting. So is it safe to assume that you developed a little bit of childhood trauma because of that, not having him in the picture early on and whatnot?
Absolutely. Especially, I guess, growing up as a child like that like I said, you don't know what it looks like to be a productive man of society. You don't know what it looks like to be a productive father, especially as you get older and now you're thinking of having families of your own and stuff. You don't know what a safe, loving father is supposed to look like,
So fast forward a little bit from that there when you first got into addiction. What drew you into addiction, and at what age were you?
It started out for me when I was about 12 or 13 years old, and to be honest with you, it started out more of like puffing paint and gas and stuff like that, and then it progressed a little bit into weed and marijuana as the years went on. And I stayed, of course, would do the drinking and things of that nature anytime, stand outside the liquor stores trying to find somebody to buy us liquor. And it just kept progressing, especially in my early youth. You get more wise to it. You start meeting more people. You go from middle school to high school where you've got a larger crowd now, and access to more things. And as the access grew, so did my addiction. It progressed pretty heavily in school up until about the time I was, I guess, 15 years old. It was a few months before I turned 16. That was about the time I got out of school. My mother, back then the internet was around, but it wasn't huge. And my mother we'd got a computer finally. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. So back then, the only people that had computers is people that had money. So she'd got her computer there and formed a relationship with a guy up in New Hampshire. And when she formed that relationship and decided that she was going to divorce my stepfather and move up there, I opted to stay here in Morristown. And that's when I kind of got out of school, quit going to school. Of course, wanted for truancy and things of that nature.
So during your addiction and going to school, how did that affect your life, like in school and with your friends? Because I know, once you start doing stuff, the old friends that you had that didn't want to participate, that were out of there. And then there's new friends that would bring you new stuff. Like, did that progress for you?
The crowds that I hung with, absolutely. They got rougher and rougher, especially when it come, 15, 16 years old, when I quit going to school, basically, you know what I mean? And just everybody, all my friends were in school, so now I'm hanging out with 19, 20-year-old guys. They're a lot further on in their life than I am. Of course, I'm 15, 16-year-old, so I think I'm as old and mature as they are, but
Right.
was so far from it, it ain't even funny. But and then my influences become them, and mother was gone, I was here, so that became my family. You know what I mean? Those people became my family, and kind of took me under their wing, and they were into selling a lot of weed and stuff like that. So that is where my life started heading, the direction I started heading there. I was with them all the time. It's what I seen. It's what I knew. And as I got older, it just it kept progressing into the now you got cocaine and stuff like that into the picture. And at this point in time in my life, I didn't really know I was even. I mean, I didn't know I was an addict. You know what I mean? I didn't consider myself an addict. We'll put it that way. It was there. I just wasn't really focused on it. Didn't think
Right.
it bothered me. As I went on and got deeper and deeper into crowds, and everything just kept escalating. Everything got bigger. The amount of drugs you're doing, the amount of alcohol you're drinking, the amount of cocaine I was drinking, and then about that time is when really the pills started coming onto the scene. Uh, I spent a lot of time, in and out of jail. I was arrested pretty much the day I turned 18 years old, and spent a little time for domestic violence. And then I would get back out, and be all right for a little bit. Like I said, I really didn't know I was an addict, smoke a little weed, drink, party, and it would always lead right back to the same problem. You know what I mean? I would end up incarcerated for some reason or another. Staying, sometimes 2-3 years at a time. And it's crazy because, in there, you're somewhat sober. I mean, there's absolutely drugs, but they're not extremely plentiful. So I would go 2 or 3 years and wouldn't really do a whole lot. And then as soon as I would hit the streets every single time, it didn't, like, right back to my old patterns, right back to the crowd. I went right back to the people.
Right.
One of the things that I've kind of noticed is that jail has a tendency of turning a man into the best version of himself while he's in jail. He's calling his mama, he's checking in on his kids, he's living that straight edge lifestyle, he's getting into the word of God, and just trying to be all the things that he should have been before he got in there. And when you get out, it's right back off to the races. But one of the things that you had said, it brought to mind generational curses. Like you had a father that was not present. And I think you made the comment that, you just wish he could get sober, wish he could cut the drugs out. And he was doing these things that you detested. And somehow or another, you ended up walking that same line behind him. And, you made a comment about wanting a safe and loving father. And one of the things in my experience, in my story, because it's kind of similar to yours in a lot of ways, is that, as a child, and I know God's a part of your story, man, and I can't wait to get to that part.
Absolutely.
So we got to lay the groundwork. But as a child, the closest thing I had to an idea of what God is was my earthly father. And because of his flaws, I ended up placing those same human characteristics on the perfect God. And, it ended up bringing me further away, further in separation from God. Is this something you were dealing with? How was the faith picture in your early days?
Well, my mother and stepfather actually, we were raised in church. Up until the time I was about 13, I was there all the time. Participated in a little youth bus route thing. I actually lived just about a mile down the road from where I went to church then. But like I said, about the time 13 come along, I developed a big problem with God, and it stayed there for a long time. I really to be honest with you, for the next 20 years, I guess I didn't want no part of God. I didn't go to church. I didn't want, even when I would get incarcerated. Now, when I would go to jail as a younger man, like I wouldn't be the guy in there reading the Bible and stuff because I thought that made me look weak and susceptible, I guess. And I didn't want him pricking at my heart. And, you know, I ran as far from him as I could. Stayed away. Didn't want no part of it.
Did you know, like during those early years of addiction and then getting to the point where now you're hanging out with older people and they are your influence now, they have become your family now. Did you know at that time that you were trying to fill a void, or was it more of, I have freedom, I'm just going to go do what I want to do? Was there any sadness there, or?
I'll tell you, when Mom moved away, there was a huge void. First of all, I love my mother with all my heart. We went quite a few years without speaking, from the time that she moved away until I was 24 years old. We didn't speak a whole lot. I held a lot of hatred in my heart. There was, you know, all these feelings of abandonment, and, you know, you're left here to deal with this stuff on your own when, and I just tried to fill it with every person in the world that, you know, I couch hopped for a lot of years. That's what I'd call it. Because like I said, I was young and I didn't have my own place or nothing, but I would stay with friends, or they, you know, somebody's parents would feel sorry for me and I would be able to crash there for a few months. And then, you know, you always wear out your welcome.
Right.
And at that point in time in my life, unconditional love was a figment of the imagination. There was no such thing you could convince me at that time. Unconditional love absolutely always had conditions.
Right.
Yeah, that's understandable. Now you talked about spending a lot of time with, you know, and I hear the same sentiment, you know, when I talk to former gang members and things like that. But, you know, the sense of family, you're describing a broken family. You know, your dad's in and out of the picture. The mother has divorced the stepfather that, you know, has come in to do his best to replace that role model. And now she's moved away, and, you know, you kind of brushed in on, you were hanging out with older guys. You know, you were spending a lot of time with people that were kind of a remolding of your biological father, you know, substances, drinking, drugs, you know, all that stuff is, you know, I know, like, you know, human beings tend to want to be part of something. They want to be part of a community, a family, you know, have a pack. And, you know, was that something that really kind of shaped your behavior and what you were doing to kind of be a part of during that time frame when you started, you know, getting into the substances? It was like, I was doing this thing for me. I was doing those types of things so I could find acceptance, so that I could fit in somewhere without really having to be my true self. Because, you know, through that childhood experience, I ended up learning how to dislike me. I didn't want to be me anymore. So I found a way to become something else and try to be something else and fit in with that crowd. Is that relatable for you?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was looking for. It was family. And it's actually, you know, you touched on a good point there. It's how I ended up in a lot of my trouble, especially getting incarcerated and stuff, because I always felt like I needed to prove myself, I guess. But like I would always be the one to jump first in the dumbest of situations that, a lot of times didn't involve me. I'd put myself in harm's way, and whether it be fighting or, if we were going to get loads of, weed and stuff like that, I would always be the first one to put myself out there to gain acceptance and love from these guys who I thought were my family at the time. Well, it didn't turn out that way, but, at this point in time in my life, they were my family. I spent a lot of years with these guys, probably, 16 years old to 25. I was with the same group of guys, and I would be in and out of jail, and everything kept progressing. I just kept digging my hole deeper and deeper. I thought it's stupid to say, but like at that time in my life, like I thought I wanted to be Pablo Escobar when I grew up. You know what I mean? Like that. I know it's dumb. That was
Everybody's got a dream.
It's like I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, and like I thought that was just the life I was destined to live. You know what I mean? I seen my father do the same. Like I learned how to sell pills from my father. My father was a pill guy from way back. Like he went back then. You had to go to 5 or 6 different states and he would bounce around to them doctors. That's where he'd always be. He'd bounce out going to those doctors and bounce out of our life. But it was what I thought was normal. It's what I thought family looked like. As dysfunctional as it sounds at that time in my life, it looked perfectly normal,
How long did that last?
That lasted up until about the time I was 24 years old. I had been married for a few years. I married my first wife. Her name was Misty Jeffries. We had my son, Caleb. We were both in addiction. By then, we're taking methadone and smoking weed and stuff, of course. Any pills we could get our hands on, not just methadone, Roxy's, just whatever was around at the time we were buying. And we were married for about a year. We'd been together a couple years. Caleb was 2 years old, and Misty, she got pregnant again with Addie Grace. And when Addie Grace come along, there was some complications with her being born, and they had to take her C-section. Misty spent a few weeks in the hospital and then come home and started having some seizures and stuff, and ended up back in the hospital. And then when she came back, she went to a coma. She was in there for 30 days or a little less. And when she come out of the coma, they let her go home, and she went into a seizure and never came back out. She was on the methadone the whole time. It was all from a doctor, Addie Grace. My daughter was born addicted to it. I sit in neonatal ICU and watched her come off the stuff while I was sitting there high on it, so I didn't have to go through what she was sitting there experiencing. And then, go ahead, Joe.
One of the, like you just said, all from a doctor. And I know, when my pill addiction began, it was, it was kind of based in the same thing, man. Like I didn't get it from a doctor, but I knew that doctors prescribed this. And I think this is a really important point to people that might be listening. And people tend to trust doctors, and like, I'm not saying don't, like, but doctors are human too. And we got to keep in mind exactly who played roles in starting an opioid epidemic. Cause doctors are definitely a big player in that. And also, like, the same pharmaceutical companies that created the epidemic and the doctors that prescribed the epidemic are now creating the cure to the epidemic and prescribing the cure for the epidemic. And I know we'll probably get more into this later, and I know a little bit of your story, but with the methadone, the Suboxone clinics, and things like that, even though it provides a break in the things that may take your life, and in your case, something that played a major factor in taking your first wife's life. We can't look the other way on that you can die from this stuff.
Absolutely.
But like from your experience with it, like having to show up at that clinic every morning and get your dose every morning, and this is how I'm going to face the day. So, like we talk, we've heard a little bit about your childhood and the way you felt so far being in the separation of God's presence. And then we start looking at other things to take God's place, pills, alcohol, marijuana, harder substances, cocaine, whatever it may be. And then we come to a point that they say, okay, well, I can prescribe you this medication that'll keep you sober. And you show up to this clinic and you're still submitting your will every day to getting that dose. Like, I can't face life on life's terms because I've got to come here and basically get on my knees at this clinic and praise my doctor or this pharmaceutical company in order to face the circumstances of life. To a lot of the people that may be watching this and may be able to relate to it, Brandon's got some really good experience on this. I do too. I've done the Suboxone, the methadone clinics and stuff like that. And one of the things, and I want you to kind of expand on this, one of the things that I experienced with that is, okay, like I was what some people would call sober. I don't feel like I was. I wasn't. I know I wasn't. But some people would, and I would take this medication to get through life. And while I was maybe physically sober, I wasn't spiritually sober. And it just kept me angry. It kept me in that separation from the one true God. And it kept me subservient and dependent and reliant on this drug in order for me just to get through the day, in order for me to go to work, to be a father, to be, a husband or a wife or whatever the role may be. I was completely dependent on a substance in order just to be a man. And, I want you to kind of expand on that a little bit. And we might come back to that later on in the conversation. But, since it got brought up this early, man, I just, that's a big, big point for me. And a big point that I think a lot of people should probably hear.
I spent a lot of years in and out of the clinics as far as methadone and Suboxone. I was a slave, simply put. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't a sick slave, but I was still held captive. I could go anywhere I wanted to, as long as I was back there. By the time I had to be back there, whether it be the week in between you getting your meds. So, I was tethered to that place. No matter what I did in my life, I was captive to it. Absolutely. It was they say, oh, it's a safer alternative, but in reality for me, it was not. It provided a way that I could get what I needed every day with minimal effort and not have to, go out here and beat the ground and stuff. And then, touched on a good thing there. I've also got this doctor that's sitting here and he's, they're telling me how good I'm doing and how everything's coming together. But in my heart, I knew I wasn't. clean. You know what I mean? I knew I wasn't sober, and it'd steal a little bit more of your peace or my peace and joy. Every time I went, it would take a little bit more until the point that absolutely now I've become so angry that, like, in everything I do, when I come home, before I went to rehab in 2016, I'd been on Suboxone for probably 5 years, almost 6 years. And it had come to the point to where I was so utterly miserable with myself and hated myself so much that I was bound and determined to make everybody around me hate me just as much as I did. Like, just get away from me. The kids would come in and, hey, Daddy, look what I did at school. And I would, just a horrible father, not engage. I wouldn't be concerned. Not a bit. The only thing I was concerned about is, making sure I kept that substance in my body every morning so I could continue to function is what it had me convinced of, that I can't. And here's the problem with it. Like I told you, I was there 6 years. And go ahead, Bex.
Oh, you could keep going.
I was there for 6 years, and as time progressed in that clinic, it got to where now the Suboxone don't do nothing. Like, I'm not getting no high off of it. It is literally just making me normal every day. Well, there's a problem because, I've also got this spiritual condition where, I've got this hole in my heart because, like I told you, I'm still mad at God. I don't want nothing to do with that at this point in my life. I was very upset with him. So I've got to have something now to get me high. So now we're on to methamphetamine. We got the Suboxone we're taking every single day with the Klonopin that they so freely give out. And so now I'm taking meth every day, and I'm staying up 3 or 4 days at a time. And it got worse and worse until I'd whittled down to 160 pounds at 6'4.5". That's a little bitty skinny old fella. And
You couldn't hardly hold your britches up, could you?
no, a strong wind would blow me away. I tell everybody all the time I look like Ahmed the Dead Terrorist. There's some pictures out there of it, like eyes all sunk back in my head. And the most amazing part about all this is I went to that doctor every 2 weeks like clockwork. Not one time did anybody ever, hey, Brandon, is everything all right? Like, you're whittling away. No, you got your money? Yes, sir. Here's my cash. And all right, here's your medicine. There was never any concern about where I was headed. Just as long as I had my money to them, then they would make sure they was my dealer,
You had answered one of the questions that I was going to ask you, because it was, getting the medicine from the doctor, did it lead to doing more hard substances? Which, of course, it did, because you're not fully clean, I don't believe, right? If you're always reliant on a substance, then you're not fully clean. This is my belief. But that was my question, because so many doctors I know, you'll go in there and you'll see them and they will tell you, like, I've been in the presence. I went there with my cousin. I brought my cousin there because she said that's what she needed. And so I'm like, okay, let's go see this doctor. And they told her that she was going to need to be on this medicine for the rest of her life. And I'm like, what? No. This doesn't need to be a rest of your life type of thing, and I think that's one of the biggest issues that keeps people hooked is these doctors are telling them that they're going to need this for the rest of their life, otherwise they're going to die. And that is absolutely not the case. And it's just a revolving door, because if they don't make it to the clinic or the doctor on a specific day, guess what? They're going to go out on the street and get something on the street, right? So either way, it's happening. It's not the cure for anything at all.
For anybody that does not agree with Bex, you can send your hate mail to Bex Howell at P.O. Box 10304, Pensacola, Florida.
I will throw it on fire.
It's a touchy subject. It really is in the recovery community, but it's something that has to be talked about because, like she said, it's, the doctors, they're fear mongering in a way. You know what I mean? Our biggest fear is as addicts is what? Sick. Everything we do is to keep from getting that sick. Every step we take is to keep from getting sick. So if they convince us that it is so horrible to live without, then like you said, we're going to be there like clockwork. It's like we're, minions.
I know you're talking about, this, you said slave. You were a slave to the substance. You were a slave to the clinic and the system and all this stuff. And, we're going to get to the big part here, like the promise that Jesus has given us when we're born again and reach salvation. And what that is freedom. So, in this slavitude, and I want to move on in your story. You just kind of talked about, when your ex-wife, she passed away. Like what was that like on your side of things? Like, you're in addiction, you're trying to cope with life. Here's this person, and I don't know how your relationship was, but like 100% of the ones I was in addiction were absolutely horrible. But what was that like on your end of it, man? Because there's two things that we kind of look at here, man. Like everybody that is trapped in addiction is also trapped in victimhood. That's what I feel like. I don't view addiction as being a disease. I view the victimhood, the depression, the loneliness, the brokenheartedness. Like those qualify to me as a disease. Those are the things that put me away from comfort. That's what disease means. Dis is away from, ease is comfort. Mm-hmm. So, like what was it like, not from that perspective, but from the other side of it? Because if you think it's hard to be an addict, try loving one. So how was that, man? Like describe what it's like to not just be with someone who's going through the struggle of addiction, but, to lose someone.
Well, I'll tell you, Misty and I both struggled with it a lot of years. It was our greatest demise. When she was up, I was down. And when I was down, she was up. When she left, it sent my addiction into overdrive and my desire to self-destruct. On one hand, I've got my two kids here that, they were with her. Now I've got to start going to court. I'm like, look, the reality of it, I couldn't have been a good father. It was impossible. Did I go to court and get rights and manipulate the system to get my way? Yeah, I did. And it worked for a very long time. But in all reality of it, like I was a sick individual. And when Misty passed away, it furthered the heartache. It furthered the hatred for God, to be honest with you. Like I was angry, like her parents, like why her, why her? Honestly, I mean, that's the question. I think anybody in that situation, like take me, leave her, these kids need her, I was a screw up, done it my whole life, been in and out of jail, like, leave her here. She's got these very good parents that love her very much. And you just, at that point in time in my life, I just thought, they're going to be so much better off with her here. But And so I just kept filling the hole, more strong, the bigger the hole got, the more powerful the drugs got. As long as I could do a couple more, I'd be all right. And, started going to the pill mills and stuff. Long after that, I met my wife now, Ashley. And, I was a damaged individual when I first met Ashley. I put her through a lot of things that she in no way deserved. And that's when, we got together. We dated for a little bit. I was still going to Florida and to the pill mills at this point. I was done with Suboxone and methadone. I didn't want to pretend like I wanted to get high. And so I started going down there to the pill mills and, running them back up here and, selling the weed and stuff this whole time, and ended up getting myself and Ashley in a real bad situation. And 5 guys come in, kidnap me. Ashley's 19 years old at the time. She is a young and don't have a clue. Her dad's a preacher. She didn't come from this life. She just thought I was this, because you always put on this front, so she thought I was this big tough guy, and she just followed me wherever. And 5 guys came in, beat the ever loving tar out of me for a couple hours, and then was trying to get us to take them to this house where they could do it to somebody else. And of course that couldn't happen. And poor little Ashley laid in the floorboard puking and throwing up. And when they finally let us go, I was beat half to death. And Ashley stayed around for a few days after that, and then she left me for a good long while. I was a hurt individual trying to hurt other people, and she just couldn't be a part of that. I'm still trying to participate in my kids' life somewhat at this point. Caleb and Addie, trying to go over there on the weekends and pick them up and fake looking like a normal human. And it didn't work. Didn't work long at all. And, then Ashley left, and there I was out like the kid again, the same kid running around in the streets by himself. I hit it wide open and just like dove deep into my addiction and isolation, in a camper on the lake. And I stayed there for a good long time, drowning in my sorrows. You said something, victimhood. And, that's everything that had happened in my life up to that point. I decided to I was a victim. You know what I mean? It wasn't, I blamed God for my actions. That's why I was so mad at him. Why, God, why do you let me go through this? It's like he had no part in the decisions that led me to where I was in my life at this time. But that's when it really started setting in how bad I was. That's not when I straightened up, but that's when it really started setting in how bad I was. And I stayed there until January the 21st of 2010. That's when I come back home with Ashley. She come up there and got me, and I would try to do all right for a while. I still was this empty, broken guy that hadn't healed from any of the things I'd been through. I just push everything as deep down as I could, and I would put a few days together. But, I never could string much time together alone. And that's when Suboxone really got big. And that's the only reason me and Ashley made it. I always tell her, I don't even know why she stayed around. She's not real smart. She got a bad judge of character, I guess. But thankfully, she's here.
Yeah, Ashley's a good woman, man. I know she's put up with a lot. But one thing, with the victimhood, that mentality, I think a lot of people, and regardless of what it is they do, like you don't You don't have to be an addict to understand this. You don't have to be anything to understand this. But once you get kind of tied down in victimhood and get this idea that nobody understands, nobody gets me, nobody has felt like I've felt before, that's when you really get stuck there. Like that, there's no moving from that point with the mindset that it's just me. Like nobody else gets me, nobody gets it. Because, like whatever your story looks like, whether it be an addict, whether it be a CEO, a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, whatever you might be, like from the lowest lows to the highest highs, you understand. Like everybody's going through some stuff right now. Like, you can literally go outside and walk into a park somewhere and hold your hands out beside you and turn around in a circle, a couple times, and you'll probably slap 5 people in the face that know exactly what you're going through, that felt the way you felt before. Your story doesn't have to mirror mine to know what it's like to hurt, what it's like to hurt. And, like one of the great things about the human condition is, well, a couple great things about it is, one, suffering leads to peace. 2, like we all go through some stuff. So, that gives us purpose. Like, all the bad things in my life that's ever happened to me has given me the best purpose I have. Like I get to be there for somebody else when they need somebody that's felt the way that they felt. And, the best thing about it is that God uses suffering for a great purpose, for a great reason. He will take that bad thing that you've done and transform it into something amazing and beautiful. In my story, I've got a lot of similarities as you. And like today, when I look back of it, like I would be so unqualified to be able to do the things I do today if it wasn't for the things that I went through, and mainly the things that I put myself through. I spent a long time wanting to blame God. I spent a long time wanting to blame myself, and or not myself, but everybody else. I had this, this opinion that I'm smarter than you are. I know everything, and it's your fault. And until I moved out of that position and started looking in the mirror and saying, you're the reason for all this stuff that's happening to you, and it's because of you, and because your unwillingness and inability to take accountability for your actions. Like that's why you're stuck here. You're not going to get better. You're not going to have any purpose, and you're going to continue to feel the way you feel until you say, okay, I did this and now I've got to do something about it. And for me, the main thing that I did about it was get out of God's way. I stopped trying to control everything. I saw somebody come along that offered me help, and instead of turning down the help I needed because it wasn't the help I wanted, I said, okay, I'm going to try something different. Because when the pain of staying the same exceeds the fear of change, like that's when willingness happens, and
Brandon,
that's when miracles start to come in your life.
Now that you've gone through all this that you've gone through for all those years, what was the major turning point? What did that look like for you? When you finally turned the corner from addiction and, found Christ, found God, found your faith.
Well, 2 weeks prior to October the 11th, 2016, that's when the good Lord had set in on me. It's funny because I had been to the doctor, had everything I needed to proceed for the next month in the life I had been living. There's a for sale sign in the front yard. There's foreclosing on the house. It's going to sell it May the 17th of 2017. And that night, it's a 1-800 number. I was sitting there, it's 2:00 in the morning in bed, and God decided that I was hiring boat gas. I'd been smoking meth. I took my Suboxone, and I had took my Klonopin, but God decided to reach through the fog and haze of everything that I had put in my body trying to hide from him and grab my heart. And he did that through a 1-800 number on TV, and it's an addiction hotline. Sitting there all by myself, I picked it up and called it, and I'm crying and upset. Everybody's in bed, wife and kids is in bed, and they said they had room and checked my insurance and everything, and called me back and let me know where I'd be going. They wanted me to leave immediately, but I had a job, so I had to do a 2-week notice and stuff. But 6:30 in the morning, I actually got up out of bed. I was, like I said, I've been up doing meth, so I hadn't slept none. But I had been crying from 2:00 that morning until I actually got up out of bed, and she come walking in there, and I just squalling and blowing snot bubbles and stuff, and said, "I'm going to rehab." And she was mad, to be honest with you. She thought I was running. She thought they were selling the house, and I was, gone. And but that just, God had a reason for getting a hold of my heart that night. And really that night's probably the first time I had talked to God in a long time. Don't get me wrong. It's not telling you it's the first time I'd been to church. I'd been to church several times to play the part, I guess, but I wasn't interested in talking to him. I was just trying to pacify people. And he decided then that, you're going to go down here. And I told Ashley I had to. And she said, "We're going to lose the house." And I said, "Honey, if I don't go down here, we're going to lose the house anyway." Like, I don't have a clue what to do. And I flew out to Florida, which is kind of comical. But I went to a rehab down there. And it's funny because the first, I'd been on the Suboxone, and I'd been tapering somewhat. So for the 2 weeks prior to me leaving on October the 11th, I tapered myself down, and my wife took me to Nashville, and I flew out to Boca Raton, Florida. I actually got kicked out of the first place I went to, but it was because they was wanting to give me Suboxone. And I, at 2:00, I had made up my mind. So October the 11th, 2016, at 4:00 in the morning, I took the last piece of Suboxone in my head, and I promised God then that was it. Like, I was done with that. I was tired. I was sick and tired of hurting and being alone and in pain and just suffering. And I was done with it. And so they kicked me out of the first place there. I went to the next one, and they were okay with me not taking it.
All right, so let's get into the treatment system, like rehabs. I had a person come up to me a couple of days ago, and I'd kind of share my story. I believe it was this past weekend, and she asked me, "Did rehab work for you?" And I've been thinking about this ever since she said it. Because for me, it gave me a break from the physical dependency, but it did nothing for the spiritual malady. So what happened when I was in treatment, it was a 28-day system. Let me clarify. I've been to 11 different treatment centers. So obviously there's a pattern of these things not working for long-term sobriety. And I'm not discouraging anyone from going to one, because they did give me clarity enough to start feeling things. But what would happen is, like, they would, I'd detox, and then they would start bringing all that trauma that I'd been covering up with the substance to the surface. And then my time was up, and the insurance was out, and it was good luck out there. We'll see you later. And I'm walking out of the door with a brain full of dynamite and just nothing to do with it. So in your experience, what was treatment like? Did you benefit from it? Like, not so much in the short term, but once you walked out of the door, was the lesson or the treatment, did it go with you?
Absolutely not. I thought I had just laid down the treat. Look, I was the only person. I didn't take a AA book. I took one book when I left for rehab, and I took my Bible. That's what I took with me to rehab. When I got down there, Like I was the only person in there that didn't have a Bible. And it was foreign to me because I knew where I needed to turn. But yeah, they're not they weren't they bring everything up. They want to sit and further my victimhood is what I felt like, to be honest with you. Like they want to tell me why I am the way I am, or you know, something that happened in my past that caused me to be this way now, and it just take all the accountability away from Brandon. You know what I mean? So you know, again, now I've got, oh, it's, you know, it's not your fault. It's this trauma, and that's why this is happening. And it's like, okay, so it
So
ain't my.
how did you handle that? Like, yeah, I'm pretty sure, you know, just from what I know about you, that you did achieve some type of long-term sobriety after this. Like, how did you handle that part of it once you walked out of the door of the rehab?
Well, I did. I got into recovery. You know, when I left rehab, I stayed connected to some guys I had met down in Florida. And when I got back here, I started going to some recovery meetings at Arrowhead Church. Is where I met a lot of the guys that I consider dear friends today. They had, it was in a church setting, which I was more comfortable with. And I, I just, that's how I kind of, that was my outlet. You know what I mean? It was hard for anybody else to understand what I was going through, but I knew I needed something more, but I wasn't real sure what it was. I would just kind of grip and hang on, and done real good for quite a few years, you know what I mean? But there was still a hole there. I didn't seek out I got into my faith real heavy, but as I got on through the years, complacency set in, and you know, falling away from it. As far as healing, like there was no sort of healing from anything. I'd still just kind of run from whatever problems would occur, and wouldn't face life like I was supposed to. I didn't apply the spiritual principles in my life that I was reading about. You know, I would sit and play the part with everything, but actually going in depth and trying to let God reshape my life was foreign to me. I didn't understand exactly how to even let him do it at this point, to be honest with you. But I knew I was committed into finding out how. And so I surrounded myself with those type of people, you know, and I kept myself in church. Church is where I found more healing than anywhere. It wasn't in a program and I know that looks different for a lot of people, but like all of my healing come from crying out for understanding, and you know, trying to find a purpose in life to fulfill this void that I've been feeling for all these years with drugs. And because now I'm sober, you know what I mean? But I got all this time and all this excess of energy, and so I'm trying to figure out how to fill it, and you know, in God's purpose, while find out what He wants me to do. What's your will for my life? Quit thinking about what I want, what I want, and start asking Him what He wanted me to do. And so I changed my whole life. Like I left the career. I'd ran equipment my whole life. That's all I'd ever done. And I got out of it because I was surrounded by all the things I didn't need to be around. And I stayed in church and took a huge pay cut, but went to a different job, which is the career I'm in now. And I've been there ever since. But, you know, church was finding God's will in my life is what, searching for it, listening for it is
But Brandon,
what
what is your relationship?
I try to
What does your
spend my
relationship with
time
Christ
doing,
look like now?
you know.
And how has it evolved over that time from the time you started your recovery process until now?
Well, I'll tell you, at this point now in my walk with Christ, you know, I feel closer than I ever have. I can actually, you know, when I pray, I can actually feel when I seek out answers, I can hear my answers. You know what I mean? I can hear God talk back to me now. For so many years, that wasn't the case. You know, I would pray and feel like I was never getting an answer, but it's because I wasn't earnestly seeking an answer. You know, I would pray and I already had my mind made up how I wanted my prayer answered. You know what I mean? God's will wasn't really in it. It was like, you know, hey God, this is what I want to happen, and and this is how I want you to do it. And as my walk with Christ has developed, and I've dove into His Word, because that's, you know, reading and studying, and that's how I'm going to get to know Him. You know, I can hit my knees and pray every morning, but until I dive into His Word and try to read and learn, that's how you learn about Him. That's how you get to know Him. You know what I mean? I can sit around and have all the meetings in the world, but until I, you know, run off to that closet and sit down and get alone with God and get alone with Jesus and actually try to learn about Him, then I could hear Him talk back to me. You know, I could see things come to fruition in my life. I could see Him working through people and placing people in my life from the career to from the career to everything. Uh, you know, I went through a lot of years, put 7 of them together, and but I still had that hole. Suboxone comes back into play. You know, it's so easily accessible. It was That was a huge problem for me. You know what I mean? Because now all these doctors are everywhere, and I can slide off and go up here to this doctor, and I can come back home, and nobody's none the wiser. You know what I mean? And the funny part about that is God was wise to it. You know what I mean? And you know, I done it for a long time, 4 or 5 months. You know, nobody had a clue. Nobody had the slightest inkling. I would sit and listen to people tell me how good I was doing. And, you know, it would hurt on the inside. I would force to smile and tell them thank you and play the part. And, you know, then it come to the point to where I was, you know, God's taken my joy and my peace. And to be honest with you, it come to a point to where, like, I'm praying again, and it's feeling like my prayers are falling on deaf ears, and I'm not certain that I can feel God respond to me. And just little by little, there goes my peace. You know, there goes my joy. Now here comes the anger. You know what I mean? And you know, I would tell my wife, and you know, but really, I wasn't doing that. So because I had plans on getting back on the path God had laid before me, I was doing that, trying to clear my conscience. You know what I mean? I was thinking, you know, I'm lying about it. So if I tell my wife, then, you know, this is going to clear my conscience. I'll get some happiness about it. No, that wasn't necessarily the case. And so now I've told her, and she's okay with it. And so I just continued the pattern for a few more months. And it was actually this dude here. You know, it's funny how God uses people that reach out and call you on a completely unrelated subject, but at the same time, you're sitting going through a battle that that only you know about, and God. And I was in conviction, like he had me. I think I was crying when I answered the phone to Jeff, and he had brought me to a place again where, you know, uh, he was done with that road for me. I did it different. A lot of people didn't agree with it. I wasn't going to afford myself the opportunity to go lay in some cush rehab for 30 or 45 days while everybody I loved suffered. I decided the suffering was what I needed. Uh, and it was exactly what I needed. And I stopped again. And again, I started praying and getting closer, stayed connected, reaching out, not isolating myself, but instead of being shameful to talk about it, calling somebody and talking about it and saying, look, I need help. I just need somebody to talk to right now. And, with the Lord's help, he brought me back out of it. I didn't do the whole rehab thing. Like I said, I sit there and suffered, and that's exactly what I deserved. That's how I felt, and I still feel that way. And they say, "Oh, you need to let go of the shame." I hope I always get that inkling of guilt in my heart and that inkling of shame in my heart when I talk about or I think about what I did at that point in time in my life. I think it's imperative for me to move forward in God's will that I remember all this pain and suffering and things that all I brought on myself. I've done every bit of this all by myself, just by stepping away from God. And, the conviction comes and you want to get further, you know what I mean, instead of answering it. So, I'm thankful that he does, deliver us from stuff like that. And, anybody out there is on that stuff. I know what they tell you. My doctor told me the same thing. Don't go, stay. You can't make it. Like those are lies from the enemy. They're all lies from the enemy. You hit your knees and you cry out, and honey, he'll hear you.
That's one thing that I was actually trying to interrupt Joe earlier for, was the suffering, the pain. Because it feels to me like everyone wants to coddle the addict, right? They want to baby them. They want to take the pain away. They want to take the hurt away. They don't want them to have to experience any of the hurt. And I think it enables them so much that it keeps them out. And so instead of allowing them to go through the pain, go through the withdrawals, go through all of the hurt to get to the other side, they're being coddled and they're being babied. And so they constantly are staying in this prison that they're allowing themselves to stay in, that they're putting themselves in, and they can't get out of it because all of the professionals are saying, you don't have to be in pain. Here, let's do this to keep you from the pain. But the pain that we go through can cause us to have full submission to God. The pain that we go through gives us the experience that I don't ever want to go through this again for the rest of my life. And then it's like that right there can be someone's true gift of desperation, going through that suffering of that pain, walking through that. And then when you get out on the other side, it's like, thank you, Jesus, for helping me get through that. There's full submission. And when you have full submission, then you can actually let him completely in your heart. And that's when he can start changing you from the inside out. And now my desires aren't, I want it about me. I want to feel good. I want it this way or my will. Now it's my desires are, please, Lord, what can I do to serve you? And when we start living our life like that, we start being changed from the inside out. Our character, our integrity, everything about our life is just completely remolded and shaped into what Jesus has planned for us. And we have to have that submission. But how are people going to get to that submission if no one's allowing them to go through the pain? I had a question in there. I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. Like the complete surrender is a pivotal thing. I know in my experience, like, I wouldn't have got there if it wasn't for the pain. If my family hadn't cut me off, if the people that I love that truly love me hadn't walked away, and that was a true form of love. We talk about that, 1 Corinthians 5:5 a lot, where Paul says to deliver this man into the hands of Satan so that, basically he can be torn from the flesh and saved in the day of the Lord, in the Lord's time. And, for me, man, I would have never found God or allowed God to find me if I didn't hit complete brokenness and just being completely empty. And it's funny, like, trauma both comes from and leads to that separation from God. And, one thing I do want to ask you, man, we've heard a lot about what life was like in separation from God. And I think guilt's a good thing. If a man's not experiencing guilt, it's because he's completely cut off from the Spirit. Guilt is conviction, and that's why nobody likes it. You look in a court of law, and it's like, once you're found guilty, you're convicted. Like, those two things go hand in hand. So guilt's not a bad thing. Like, people try to tell you that it is, but that is God tugging at you. And it's like, I'm not done with you yet. I'm not giving up on you. Like, because you feel bad about this thing, that means there's still good in you. Without good, you don't feel bad. So I want you to kind of elaborate on, like, just give us a quick comparison. Life in separation from God to now, today, life in the presence of God. Like,
happy, joyous, and free. Like the life I get to live today is beyond me. Like I said, I can see God working in my life. I can see myself being a vessel for God. Like, that sounded weird coming out of my mouth a little while ago. It really did. To sit around and think that God could use someone as broken or damaged as me to do anything good was just mind baffling to me. But it's exactly the opposite. You know what I mean? I get to live this life today where I can go talk about Him. I can go study His Word. I get to go do things with you guys, like we've been got to do some things here these last few months that just, you can feel God all over it. You can see God work in it. When I say you can see God working in it, like, it's minimal effort. Things just, when you're walking in God's grace, you don't have to force life. Like, I'm not forcing life now. It's just flowing exactly the way He wants it to go. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to make myself be here, make myself be there. I want to be wherever God wants me to be. Like that, I just want to walk where He wants me to walk. And as long as I keep myself in that mindset, like, not only, like, I'm happier, my house, my family is happier. You know what I mean? You get to, the guy between your ears, you know what I mean? You don't have to sit and listen to all the whispers of, not being worthy. And because now I know I'm saved, I'm forgiven. I get to go and, tell somebody else that was broken like me, like, hey, you don't have to sit like this. You don't have to feel like this. You can turn it all over to God. And it's really that simple. It gets overcomplicated so much. Just, turn it over to God and let him lead you. Yes, it's going to take reading scripture, and it's going to take studying and going to church and getting in an assembly. Proverbs 13:20 says, he that walketh wise shall be wise, but a companion of fools will be destroyed. So I get to go to church today and be a member and surround myself with you guys and people from the church, and like constantly have my wise men circle. These are the people, this is where I go get fed. This is the people that, I want to be like them. I see their walk with Christ, and I'm like, I want that. You can see peace all over them in their life, and I have peace in my life today because of it. There's no more tossing and turning at night when I go to bed. Hey, baby, when we get done with this and I go in here and my head hits that pillow, I'm done. I'm out. I can close my eyes. I can go to sleep. There's no flipping over and staring and running through all these thoughts in my head of, what I've done the day before. God gives me a peace about it.
I think we can take from Proverbs that we shouldn't hang out with Jeff anymore.
Hey, it's living proof that when the good Lord poked on this guy's heart and said, hey, I need you to call Brandon.
Listen.
Hey,
so
for
let me
everybody
ask
out
you
there,
this:
if
the
God
people
can
out
use
people out
Jeff,
there that are still struggling,
you're a winner either
how would
way.
you encourage them? What would you say to them to turn toward God to help them?
I would tell them to cry out, like Joe is a prime example. He said he'd been to 11 rehabs, and you see that so often when you go into the rehabilitation center. Like, try something different. You know what I mean? Dive into God's word and find you a church. It don't matter. There's so many out there today. If you don't like one, go to another. When you're going to find your crowd, your flock, and of people that just love and accept you and wants you to come for you. And then that's when you can start diving into God's word and reading. And that's when the sanctification process really starts taking place in your life. Like, I can sit and pray all I want to, but till I actually dive into his word and try to learn about him, then the sanctification process don't start. It's hard to know Jesus if you don't know his word. I'm called to hide it in my heart. It's the owner's manual. If your car breaks down, you consult the owner's manual in your dash. It's that simple in life. When crap goes wrong, consult the owner's manual. You know what I mean? Don't run to the doctor or run to the world for advice. The world's what got us in trouble. Run to the owner's manual.
Absolutely, man. One thing I noticed in my extensive treatment history is, I see people like 90% at least of the people that come in there, like by the time they get on week 2 or 3, they've decided this career path that they want to be an addictions counselor. But one thing I rarely hear in that is, I want a closer relationship with my creator. And this is one of the reasons why the success rates are so low. We hear things like 2% actually find recovery, like sustained and lasting recovery. And, there's a stat out there, and Jeff might have to spot check me on this, but, the overdose rates are incredible right now. I think it's every 10 days to 2 weeks that America has a 9/11 caliber event from overdose death. Every we'll say 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, 9/11 happens with overdoses.
Mhm.
And, it's like, in the country we live in, it's like if that happened in any other demographic, like it would be a national crisis. But because it's drug addicts, it's the people that are considered throwaways. They're no good. Look at how they're living. They're thieves. They're liars. They're all these things. And I mean, honestly, we were. But this is where the power of the life-changing blood of Jesus comes in. Like, you can be born again. Brandon said a few things like, he's saved. He's faithful. These new names that Christ has given him, where he's no longer called addict or alcoholic or deadbeat or loser or criminal or whatever he was referred to as. Like, all these titles that he probably did earn. But today it's redeemed. It's saved. It's child of God. And I think that's it's so powerful that the act of Christ on the cross and the way he changed the cross from something bad, horrible, and terrible into something amazing, great, and good is the same thing he does in our lives every day. Like, he takes the bad and makes it good. He takes the mistakes and he makes it the message. He takes the test and he makes it your testimony. And, for anybody that might be out there listening to this, man, never withhold your testimony. I think John 9:25, it's one verse that I always overlooked in the Bible, but in chapter 9, he's talking about Jesus has healed this man who was born blind. And the Pharisees are coming in and they're questioning him and they're saying, who did this? What happened? They ask him 3 times. They don't believe him, so they ask his parents. And then they go back and ask him again. It's like, was this man that helped you a sinner? And what 9:25 says is, I don't know if he was a sinner. All I know is I was blind and now I see. That's a testimony, man. Like, just tell your experience with Jesus Christ, man. It doesn't have to be this long, drawn out thing, but I know what he's done in my life because I once was blind and now I see. He has given me new eyes. He's removed the scales and he's given me a new name.
Amen.
And he can do that for you too.
I'll tell you what.
Amen.
Oh, here we go.
I do have one question, Brandon. Just real quick, man. I didn't see anybody with another question in the chat. So, you're a grave digger, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, just with that job, man, like digging graves, how much of a good reminder is that to you to where you were headed?
I see it every day. I can't even tell you how many of my friends I have buried because of addiction overdoses. I can't even tell you how many just last year. It is a constant reminder that it's the outcome if I don't invite Jesus into my heart and let him transform my life. Like, that is where that's the only result that addiction will bring. You know what I mean? Jails, institutions, or death. More often than not, it's death. I see, I'll tell you what my heart pours out for today and really tugs at my heartstrings is when it's over and I see the family standing there. They're left behind. Their hurt's not gone, but the addict's is. But now this family has got this huge hole in their life. And it just really shows you how selfish you can be at times, that sounds cruel and I don't mean it to, but like, it's the innocent victims. They're the victims. Like, I was never the victim in anything I done. I got some in here I can introduce you to but I was never the victim. I was the aggressor. I was the one that caused the problems. And yeah, I see it every day.
Oh, wow.
I'll tell you. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just, I just want to thank you for your honesty, man. I appreciate, you being so transparent with that answer. I kind of meant it as not a playful question, but just throwing one out there in relation to something, and the response.
We've heard a lot today, right? We've heard a lot.
It was really profound.
Right.
Where you've come from, the hot seat. You've been in the hot seat the whole time. We've heard a lot from where you were, where you've come,
the hot seat,
how you got there, the reasons why you got there, how you got there. Is there anything else you want to add to anybody else that's listening? Amen. Amen.
You can find a father in a Bible.
Bingo.
Well, great. It's been wonderful, Brandon. I
Great,
appreciate
I
you being
am.
here. I'm sure everybody
Yes,
else here
ma'am.
appreciates you being here. Appreciate your vulnerability. I know I love you personally, dearly. And Bex, Joe, got any last words before we pray out?
Bex,
Well,
I know you have words.
I can sit here all day and talk about my Jesus.
Give her an inch. She thinks she's
You
a
all know
ruler.
that. 20 minutes, I'll take 3 hours. Like Brandon said earlier, I don't know what your problems are. I don't. I know you got them because we all got them. But what I do know is that Jesus is the solution to every single one of them. If there's a void, he fills the void. If there's sickness, he's our great healer. It doesn't matter what you're going through. You're stressed out, he will give you peace. He will deliver you from the misery of this world. And all you have to do is accept him as your Lord and Savior. That is it. Follow him. And I'm going to tell you, it's hard. It's a hard and narrow road to walk. But
Appreciate that, Bex.
man, is it
Joe,
worth
you got
it.
anything you want to add?
I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, I just want to thank you again, Brandon, for coming on, man. It's always inspirational to me, and I'm sure to these two that we get to see what Christ can do in somebody's life. It's not so much that you have to know everything about the author to share your experience with him, and you mean the world to me. Dear friend of mine, we're really blessed to have you and Ashley be a part of what we're doing. And, just a reminder to everybody out there, man, October 4th, it's going to be a life-changing day. We'll be at Cherokee Park in Morristown, Tennessee. That's Brandon's hometown. So if it sucks, blame Brandon. But it's going to be an amazing event. And, I'm just so excited about it. I can't get here fast enough. And, we're truly blessed to have the people that we have in our lives today. They are, every single one of them has been an absolute gift from God. So, I appreciate you. I appreciate you too as well.
A few more announcements that we're going to make over the next couple of weeks here. Some other events that we're going to have leading up to the revival, different cities. A couple of them that are on the radar right now is Atlanta, Ohio, Houston, Tennessee as well, possibly North Carolina. So, keep your eyes and ears open. And as always, like, share, subscribe to this here. Check out our Zoom meetings that we have. Check out all our socials. We'll list everything out there. You can find us pretty much anywhere. You can find us under Warpath Ministries. So with that, we say goodbye.